state that votes in this process. That's New Hampshire, 8 days from today. So can the second place finisher. The third place sometimes can punch their ticket to New Hampshire. Really depends upon whether or not they met or exceeded expectations. But it's also important to consider that the winner of the Iowa caucus on the Republican side does not always become the Republican presidential nominee. You have Mike Huckabee, Rick Santorum, Ted Cruz. They've all won the Iowa presidential caucus in their respective election cycles, but they failed to become the Republican nominee. Donald Trump, way back in 2016, he came in second place to Ted Cruz. So Donald Trump's trying to show that he can win Iowa and win it big. That's what polls are indicating, that indeed he is the front runner to win the Iowa caucus.
Now, John, it is -3 in Des Moines, wind chill of -21. I've never experienced temperatures this cold here. Do you think the weather is appearing to impact the outcome here? How's participation looking?
Well, it's a great question. It certainly impacted the schedules of the candidates. They've, in some cases, canceled events. They've curtailed events over the course of the past few days because of the blizzard that hit a good chunk of the state. In addition to that, you mentioned the weather, the temperatures of sub-zero temperatures. That's what it will be like when voting gets underway across the entire state. Wind chills perhaps as low as -30. So we'll wait and see whether or not that impacted the turnout for voters, because let's face it, I think that for a lot of voters, they'd much rather be in the comfort of their homes than out at a caucus site dealing with tough road conditions and also those freezing cold temperatures.
Yeah, and, you know, very early, the caucus just got underway just a few minutes ago. But are we hearing anything yet from the former president or any of the other candidates?
Well, Donald Trump, in an interview that he did within the past 24 hours, indicated that he expects to win big here in Iowa. You have a poll that came out within the past 24 hours. It was a joint poll conducted by NBC News and the Des Moines Register newspaper. It shows among those that were polled, Donald Trump leading with 48%, followed by Nikki Haley at 20%, and Ron DeSantis, the Florida governor, at 16%. For Ron DeSantis, that would not be a good finish based upon the amount of time, the amount of energy, the amount of resources that he spent in the state. He's visited all 99 counties, Camila. He's been endorsed by Iowa's Republican governor, who's campaigned alongside him. To finish in third place after all that would be disappointing, and there would be some who would question whether or not he has a path to be the Republican presidential nominee.
Yeah, lots to see tonight, John. And as the Iowa caucus is already underway now, can you just give us a little bit of the feel of the room? What is the scene like right now?
Well, the room that I am in, Camila, is the room in which results will come in. Now, as you point out, the caucus process has already begun at more than 1,600 caucus sites across the state of Iowa. I've been in these caucus rooms in previous election cycles. The room that I am in right now is where all the results will come in, and they'll flash on these large screens behind me. We're likely to get some results based upon the last election cycle within the first 40 minutes or so, but it's really around the 9-10 o'clock hour, your time, East Coast time, that will get the bulk of the numbers coming in to give us an indication in terms of who is likely to win this year's Republican Iowa caucus.
All right, John, and of course, we will check in with you as we start to see those results, and we'll see them on the screens there behind you. Thank you for joining us. All right, House correspondent John Decker. And of course, the Iowa caucus means the official start of the 2024 election year. LNL's senior national correspondent Peter Zampa was on the ground in Iowa hearing what matters to voters in their choice for a presidential nominee.
Iowa voters are used to being the tip of the political sphere. Every 4 years, they go in first, often eliminating candidates, exposing those who do or do not have what it takes to go far in this race. The voters we're speaking to say they're looking for substance, someone who can get the job done right. Nowhere will you find more politically in tune voters than in Iowa, especially here at Raygun, a well-known political paraphernalia shop with hints of humility and flippancy, leans into the small state's outsized electoral importance.
If we don't have the caucuses, I think in the back of our mind, we think, uh-oh, are we just South Dakota now? Are we like a regular Midwestern state?
Founder Mike Draper says his passion project exploded onto the political scene with the 2008 caucuses. He's been cashing in ever since.
You might do an extra $100,000 in business. I wouldn't say that you could build an entire company around one event that only happens every 4 years, kind of like the Dork Olympics, but we have made tons of connections.
With snow blocking sidewalks in downtown Des Moines, we took to the city's skywalks, where voters are focused on kitchen table issues as Republicans vie for their support.
The economy's top of mind. What's going to happen in 2024? Are we going to slip into recession? Are we going to be okay in 2024? And what's the future going to look like?
The economy, a top concern for Brenda Haar as well. The Trump supporter wants to keep focus on domestic issues, not more money to foreign countries like Ukraine and Israel.
We have people in the United States who need to be taken care of. We have the homeless, we have the veterans, we have those folks who should be taken care of first.
Haar says she's not worried about Trump's legal woes. The former president is facing 91 felony charges spanning multiple indictments.
It doesn't bother me one bit either way. I think he'll be fine.
Beyond the candidates, these Iowans are proud of their caucuses and what they bring to the state.
Nothing but good things, getting Iowa out there and getting the exposure to the state.
You get to see people that you don't see in any other Midwest town.
I think it's kind of cool, that we're kind of like center of attention and everybody's looking at us.
Now, when these Republican voters go to caucus, it will not be like a normal election day. They go to schools and other sites at 7 p.m. sharp, but candidate representatives will be on site making their final pitches. Then the voters will go write down their preferred candidate on secret ballots. Those are then tallied up, sent off to the state party, where they will determine which candidate comes away with how many delegates from the state of Iowa. Now, Democrats this year are starting their nominating process in South Carolina for a change. That first primary for them, February 3rd. I'm Peter Zampa, listening to America.
Peter Zampa there reporting. And of course, the Iowa caucuses are the first test of who voters prefer ahead of the presidential election in November. Tonight, we are joined by Stephen Voss, a political science professor at the University of Kentucky. He'll be with us all night, Steve. Go ahead and just let's explain it to us. Lay it out. How does the caucus work exactly?
It's a much more labor-intensive system. It demands more of the voters than a primary where you just roll in, pull some levers, or fill in some circles and walk out again. For that reason, the downside to Iowa is that it's usually had lower voter turnout than we see in primaries. The plus side, though, is those voters have been able to vet these candidates at a level most of us don't get to do. And they've more likely to have heard them speak in person, or more likely to have seen repeated appearances by them in the local news. So it's an informed vote. So there's a plus and minus here to what happens in Iowa.
Now, do the winners of the Iowa caucuses historically win their party's nomination for president, or how big of an impact does it have?
So winning the Iowa caucus brings a lot of benefits. It means people who donate money, contributors take you more seriously, voters take you more seriously. News coverage is more likely to focus on you if you beat the expectations. Lots of advantages come from the Iowa caucus, but I think people have exaggerated how much impact the caucus actually has. The Democrats in their caucuses used to have a good record. Iowa Democrats were close enough to sort of where the country stood as a whole that if a Democrat won the Iowa caucus, they had a good chance of making it through the nomination system and winning the nomination. Only 3 exceptions since the caucuses started did Iowa get it wrong on the Democratic side, and that was all cases where someone from the region was running and had a sort of a bias in their favor. Iowa Republicans are not as representative, and therefore the people they've picked don't have anything like the track record that Iowa Democratic victors do.
And Steve, we've heard a lot in this race that this could be a race for second place behind former President Donald Trump. What would winning that second place mean for that candidate?
Yeah, whether we're talking about Trump himself or his challengers, as your correspondent said earlier, it's an expectations game. And the bounce you get coming out of Iowa is not based on whether you win first, second, third. It's whether your performance looked like people expected. And if you come in second, but you did a lot better than expected, you start getting taken seriously and you start seeing resources come your way. You can win, but if it's a disappointing win, then it can harm more than help. People are saying Donald Trump's going to win big, but by the standards of someone who's already been president, if Donald Trump only performs at the level the polls are showing, that's a fairly weak performance for someone so clearly dominant.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Steve. We'll check back in with you in just about 30 minutes. And now you're taking another live look at the GOP caucus happening right now in Des Moines, Iowa. Coming up, what matters most to voters in Iowa? Stay with us.
Local news live, always streaming, always free.
There's so many rewards in life.
Women are bad with money. That's what the world's been saying for centuries. But now,
right now, and we are taking a look at the one in Des Moines, Iowa, where Nikki Haley is speaking. Let's go ahead and listen in.
We took the kidney sign off of our backs, and America was respected again at the UN. Now I'm running for president, and you don't have to turn on the news. Beth, is it there? Are you going to give me another one? Whether it's the reckless spending we see coming out of Republicans and Democrats in Washington, the enormous amount of debt that our kids will never forgive us for. Whether it's the fact that only 31% of 8th graders in our country are proficient, only 27% of 8th graders are proficient in math. Whether it's the fact that we are seeing lawlessness on our border that doesn't even look like the United States of America anymore. Whether it's lawlessness in our streets or the fact that the world is on fire and America feels vulnerable. Our country is in a disarray, and the world is on fire. But it doesn't have to be this way. We can do better. But we have to acknowledge some hard truths. Republicans have lost the last 7 out of 8 popular votes for president. That's nothing to be proud of. We should want to win the majority of Americans. But the only way we're going to win the majority of Americans is if we have a new generational leader that leaves the negativity and chaos of the past and moves forward with new solutions for the future. You don't defeat Democrat chaos with Republican. thing that keeps me up at night is what happens between now and Election Day. And God help us if we ever get a President Kamala Harris, because we won't survive it. In every one of those head-to-head polls against Biden, I defeat Biden by double digits, even 17 points in the Wall Street Journal poll. Do you know what that means? That's bigger than the presidency. That's governorships, that's House, that's Senate, that's school boards. But more than that, you win with a double-digit win over Biden going into D.C. That's a mandate to stop the out-of-control spending and get our economy back on track. That's a mandate to get our kids reading again and go back to the basics and require them to say the Pledge of Allegiance when they start school every day. That's a mandate to secure our borders with no more excuses. That's a mandate to bring law and order back to our country. And that's a mandate that is strong, where our military men and women know that we're out there trying to prevent war, not start war. That's what we can have. That's the kind of America we can have. You know, 6 months ago, I'm the proud wife of
Nikki Haley in Des Moines, Iowa, speaking to caucus goers, making her presence known and encouraging her supporters to vote, of course, trying to emerge as a leading alternative to former President Donald Trump. Tonight, we are listening to Iowa. Our reporter Beth Malicki with our station KCRG hit the streets to get a feel for what matters most to the state's voters.
Does it get more Iowa to name a newborn calf after your favorite caucus candidate?
Smile pretty for the camera. Show them your...
Meet DeSantis, or as Vinton farmer Lance Lillibridge calls the governor, Ron.
When I first visited with Ron, he did not tell me what I wanted to hear. He said, I need to learn more. I want to understand agriculture in Iowa.
Lillibridge guided that education, giving DeSantis a tour of an ethanol plant in Jessup. Lillibridge used to be the president of the influential Iowa Corn Growers Association. And although he voted twice for Donald Trump, he won't be voting for him a third time.
But Donald Trump says, I got farmers $24 billion or $28 billion. What he doesn't tell you is what that cost us. That cost American taxpayer. That cost us as farmers a lot of money when we disrupted trade routes. When his administration approved more small refinery exemptions than any other, that did more ethanol destruction as far as demand goes than it did good.
Lillibridge couldn't make a DeSantis event in Benton County due to an injury, and the governor noticed.
On July 29th, I was in a motorcycle accident. And I got a phone call about a week after that. It was after I had my surgery, and it was a no caller ID number, and it was Governor Ron DeSantis when I answered the phone, and I'm like, well, and he says, Lance, he says, I've heard that you were in an accident. How are you doing? Are you okay?
That kind of access didn't happen in Illinois, where Jody Bjerke moved from in the last year. She's caucusing for the first time, and in between enrolling 3 kids into new schools, she's been meeting candidates.
I did see Trump, I did see Vivek, and I plan to see Ron DeSantis. I think he's coming to town this week.
Not letting, focusing on what the teachers can actually teach, and are they indoctrinating children, in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade with, well, this is my pronouns, and you need to call me by this. I mean, that just confuses children.
And believes America's future hinges on the 2024 presidential election.
I'm an evangelical Christian, so I'm looking at kind of everything through my lens of faith.
A view he fears could be at risk, if not for his generation, then for his 4 children and their future children.
And if we don't stand up and fight for that, then it is just going to fall away. We're not going to be able to save this country.
And those threats aren't just Democrats, but also the Republican frontrunner in the Iowa caucuses, Donald Trump.
Who's a bigger threat, in your estimation, to the future of America? A second term for Biden or a second term for Trump?
I don't think that Trump can win a general election. We saw what happened in 2020. And I have no clue if there's any way that he could win. There's going to be so much media on it, on his, especially on all the legal battles that are going on out there right now. We have to take that into consideration.
3 Republicans intent on seeing a conservative in the White House. And that first step starts in Iowa, where they will make their voices and votes count.
All right, more news after the break. Stay with us here on Local News Live.
Local News Live, always streaming, always free.
There's so many rewards in life.
GOP caucus continues. The National Weather Service says this is the coldest Iowa caucus since 1972. Experts believe the freezing temperatures will impact turnout. But now Iowa is not the only place facing a wave of winter weather tonight. Let's go ahead and take a look at the national weather forecast with our LNL meteorologist, Sandra.
Frostbite in as little as 15 to 30 minutes, so do be careful out there. In terms of snowfall, we've had some snow across portions of the Rockies. Also, mainly we've been watching this area across the southeast. In fact, snowfall being reported as far south as southeastern Texas, a little more than a trace there, but areas in Mississippi, also up into Tennessee, and also Arkansas reporting about 2.5 inches of snowfall in the past 12 hours in northeastern portions of Arkansas. And also, we're seeing just south of Memphis, seeing a little more, or I guess I should say almost 4.5 inches of snowfall being reported in the past 12 hours. And then right around Memphis, in Midtown Memphis, more than 4 inches of snowfall already in the past 12 hours. So we are going to see That total rising a bit as we continue, but that snow will continue to move towards the north and northeast, spreading over more of the mid-Atlantic and also the northeast. Now, we also have an ice storm warning to talk about for Portland and surrounding areas. Significant icing expected. This ice storm warning goes into effect tomorrow morning through Wednesday morning. In fact, accumulations anywhere from 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch of ice expected. So some very slick spots in those areas, and also numerous power outages could result as that significant icing. Now, through midnight, we'll have a winter storm warning continuing for Memphis and surrounding areas. That is an additional 2 inches of snow will be possible, also a glaze of ice possible. And then moving northward into Virginia, many areas of Virginia could see as much as 1 inch, possibly 3 inches of snowfall. So it's likely to be a slippery Tuesday morning commute in many locations. So we'll time things out for you. This is just before midnight. We have that snow that's overspreading West Virginia. A little bit more of a wintry mix, though, as precipitation starts to exit Tennessee and also portions of Alabama. Now, as we continue northward, this is going to be snow, and it is going to add up across areas in Pennsylvania as we look ahead to tomorrow afternoon, and also up towards Maine. We'll have that snowfall still continuing tomorrow. This is timed out around 2 p.m. Still have the snow falling in New York, stretching through the New England area and also into Maine, and could be a little bit of a wintry mix for southern portions of the New England region. But again, we're also seeing plenty of moisture coming on shore of the Pacific Northwest, so it is likely to be a wet one, a little bit of a mix as well. And keep in mind that ice storm warning for Portland and surrounding areas tomorrow morning through Wednesday morning. But as for tomorrow afternoon's temperatures, just 10 for the actual air temperature in terms of high for Bismarck, Duluth, single-digit highs, 11 in Sioux City. But again, keep in mind that wind is going to make it feel even colder. At times, through tomorrow morning, it could feel like double digits below zero.
Local news live, always streaming, always free.
There's so many
You're watching Local News Live. I'm Camila Rueda.
And I'm Graham Olkins here on Iowa Caucus Night, an exciting night in Iowa, of course.
Yes, and we have our very own Iowa political director, Dave Price, in Des Moines. Dave, thank you for joining us. Voters bracing the elements to get out and vote. Of course, weather is a huge factor today. Do you think that it's affecting caucus turnout at all?
Oh, it might, but it's also winter in Iowa. It's not usually this cold when caucus night happens to hit, so this will be a record low tonight. And there's been so much snow over this past week where in a lot of places you've had almost 2 feet of snow. So that's unusual. Big picture, we usually get a really cold stretch every year or so. It just so happens it's hitting on caucus night this time.
And Dave, of course, Iowans braving those elements, getting out there tonight. They've really just kind of started in the last hour or so. Tell us, though, what its predictions are looking like tonight. Of course, former President Donald Trump has been leading in all of the polls, but it's kind of a race for second place. How do you see this shaping up tonight?
Exactly, and we don't normally have a former president running, of course, so that's the uniqueness of this. Donald Trump got second when he ran in 2016. This time around, he's far more organized. He hasn't been here a lot, but he's put together that campaign infrastructure that he lacked back in 2016. Now, we are starting to get our first numbers of the night, 319 people. Their caucuses have been totaled and tallied and posted up here, and Trump has about 75%. It's just 319 people, so we don't want to overblow this, and it's various parts of our state. But obviously, the assumption is that Trump is going to win, and he's going to win big. The question is, how big? Can he get above the 50% margin? Nobody's ever done that. Usually, if you get 30% or so, that's a pretty big night. But I have to keep saying this over and over. We're talking about a former president. He should be dominant on caucus night. So that's the unknown factor here. Below 50%, then the argument can be made, well, about half the people supported him, but half the people wanted somebody else. So that's what we'll be watching. So realistically, we're really going to be watching to see whether Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley gets second. For DeSantis, who has all but lived here and invested so much here, it would be crushing for him if he gets third, especially after he said numerous times he'd actually win here. Nikki Haley doesn't have quite the same pressure since she's positioned pretty well in New Hampshire, where more independents can take part in their primary. So she would love to beat DeSantis here to potentially knock him out of the race if he doesn't fare very well tonight.
And do you think the candidates that maybe don't get that second place spot, do you think it's a live or die for their campaign?
That's what a lot of the conversation will be. Now, if you go further down the list, Vivek Ramaswamy, frankly, the Ohio businessman, he has campaigned more than anybody. He held far more events than anybody had. He's been all over the place from morning until late at night. He's had stuff that's gone till midnight, which is not usually how it works here. And he is telling people over and over he's going to shock everybody with the numbers he gets. If he does, it will be a shock because none of the polls have shown that, including the one that came out this past weekend. He registers in the single digits. Further down there, Asa Hutchinson, the former governor of Arkansas, Ryan Binkley, the Dallas area pastor and business executive, they both had 1% in the polls. They are both looking at Ramaswamy, hoping that they could beat him. They all say they're going to move on to New Hampshire. From a practical standpoint, it's expensive to go through this. And how much can you put yourself out there going to all these events, doing all this work, living out of hotels, and you don't have much to show for it? So the pressure would be pretty strong on some of these folks to say goodnight if they do poorly here.
All right, Dave, and we're just getting word in our ears from our producers, the AP actually calling this for Donald Trump as far as being the winner. We did expect that. Yeah, the leadoff winner here. I know you're not directly in front of your devices at the moment while you're talking to us. Is that a surprise, though, to hear that the AP is calling this leadoff so quickly for Trump?
It would be highly surprising because people are still caucusing, and I don't know what their procedures are, but in a typical election, you don't want to make a call before the polls are closed. People are literally still caucusing, so if they've already called that, that's surprising. I don't know what their policy is.
Yeah, well, we will certainly be following that, and as we get these pieces of information trickling in tonight. But again, that's just a one-liner from the Associated Press, so they're making this call pretty early. But we, of course, will touch back base with you a little bit later.
Yeah, very early.
Thank you so much,
Okay,
Dave. Our
sounds
Iowa
good. Thanks.
political director, Dave Price, joining us here. And of course, tonight's caucus is just the first test of who the nation would like to see in the White House.
Coming up next, we speak with political science professor Stephen Voss about what this all means for the race for 2024 as we're literally just kicking it off tonight. Stay with us. On this exciting evening is Stephen Voss, a political science professor at the University of Kentucky. Stephen, I think you've been listening in. I don't know how much you've heard. The Associated Press just calling officially the Iowa caucuses for Donald Trump. Just curious your take on that and how you see second place playing out tonight.
Well, it's not a surprise that they know Donald Trump was going to win by now. I mean, he was leading so far in the polls that those early precincts would have had to have been returning like massive numbers for his competitors for people to reconsider the likelihood he'd win. Now, as your correspondent said, there's an ethical question whether it's okay that people are announcing who's going to win or projections of who's going to win before the voting's done. We've heard in the past, arguments that maybe people ought to add limits, laws ought to add limits so that you can't tamper with an election by releasing such projections before the voting's done. That's a little bit surprising, but it's not surprising they know it.
Okay, so not surprising that they know it, but what about second place? Is this now a race for that second place, and what does that mean for that candidate?
Well, so sure, it could be if Donald Trump ends up a little weak, if the second place candidate really distinguishes herself or himself, that could be the real story coming out of Iowa, is that somebody performed much better than expected. But if Donald Trump really tops 50% by a large amount, if he crushes both of the second and the third place opponent, then no, what we may be talking about is that Donald Trump's got this thing. It's looking as though he's on target to wrap it up even faster and more powerfully than anticipated. So no, it could be a race for a really strong first place instead.
We'll be watching those numbers. Of course, the weather has been the other big story tonight. I've seen some of the candidates offering to shovel driveways to get people out there. They're offering to transport drivers to caucus sites themselves. What do you make of the role the turnout is going to play tonight?
So, yes, everybody's been talking about the weather, and the weather leads to expectations of disappointing turnout. But if indeed we get what everyone expects, low turnout, it's not only going to be the weather that's an explanation. I mean, we know who the Democrat is. We think we know who the Republican winner is going to be. So there's very little competition for first place in either party. Now, you might think, well, why does it matter that Joe Biden's got the Democratic nomination basically wrapped up to Republicans who couldn't have voted in that one anyway? Voting is a social experience. And if all your Democratic neighbors or family members aren't getting excited about the caucuses, then that has spillover effects on the enthusiasm you'd expect to see on the Republican side. So we have all these reasons why turnout might be disappointing. The real surprise would be if turnout's higher than expected.
Okay, now I want to ask you, AP reporting that Trump is taking tonight, but as we look ahead, what does this mean for the other states?
Well, New Hampshire's next, right, for the Republicans. And Ron DeSantis was not focused on New Hampshire the way he was on Iowa. So if we do see Nikki Haley distinguish herself significantly from DeSantis, what we might see is what often happens with Iowa and New Hampshire is DeSantis may reconsider whether he wants to keep investing resources on moving on. We call that the winnowing effect. We may see some winnowing of the candidates. If Ramaswamy doesn't pull the surprise that he promised was coming and his results end up as disappointing as they looked, he might want to reconsider. So that's the main likelihood of what will happen in the 8 days between these contests is we might see some winnowing from candidates who don't outperform expectations.
And Professor, what do you make of the general impact of Iowa, the first in the nation, on this race long term? When it comes, historically speaking, toward the end of the race, does Iowa usually play a significant role, or does it just kind of much ado at the very beginning and then kind of fizzle out? What do you think the role of Iowa is in the big picture?
Yeah, Graham, as I mentioned earlier in the show, there are lots of advantages candidates get when they do outperform expectations coming out of Iowa, but it's not as powerful as people have thought. One reason Iowa Democrats were so successful at picking the eventual nominee is because they looked close enough to the sort of swing voters who decide presidential contests and nomination battles. Iowa Republicans usually haven't been representative of the typical Republican who's going to decide nominations, and Iowa Republicans have a very poor record of picking who would eventually get the nomination. So I think that Iowa bounce has been exaggerated in conventional discussion.
Stephen Voss, political science professor at the University of Kentucky, thank you so much. He'll be with us all night.
Thanks, Professor. Stay with us here on Local News Live as we're just settling in. The first few caucus results trickling in. Again, the Associated Press has officially called it for Donald Trump no surprise, but there still could be some other surprises tonight. Stay with us.
Portion of the country tonight. Just take a look at this person skiing down the street in Memphis, Tennessee. No cars in sight, no tire tracks, just skis. I mean, it seems like a pretty good way to get around.
Yeah, and a pretty good workout, too. 150 million Americans under a wind chill warning or advisory for dangerous cold and wind as that Arctic air mass moves south and east across the U.S. Let's get a closer look at your national forecast tonight from our station, KSFY.
Hello, I'm meteorologist Phil Schreck from Dakota News Now in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And look how much above normal we were on Wednesday, especially in the central part of the country. At the same time, below normal along the eastern seaboard. Now, looking ahead to the next few days, we're going to have that warmer air moving off to the east. We do cool off in the central and western portions of the country. At the same time, we start to warm back up heading into Saturday to start the weekend. And here's Sunday. A lot of the country expected to have above normal temperatures, even into Monday and Tuesday, especially in the western part of the country. Things will be above normal as we head further into December. So here's Futurecast, and the main thing to watch is down to the south as we head into Thursday and Thursday afternoon. Could be some severe weather going on around the Gulf coastal states and maybe as far north as Arkansas. And we're also going to be watching some snow and rain moving into the northwestern part of the country. At the same time, that rain moving up to around the Great Lakes from that system down to the south. And then here's Friday afternoon. Not a heck of a lot going on over most of the country. Some rain in the northeast and also some rain and snow in the northwestern parts of the United States. The severe weather risk for Thursday, as I mentioned, mainly in the Gulf coastal states here, Texas, on into portions of Louisiana, and a marginal risk up farther to the north around Oklahoma. And then meanwhile, in the southeastern part of the country, a marginal risk of some severe storms from Louisiana over to the Florida Panhandle. Let's check out that 8 to 14 day temperature outlook. Look at this. As we go further into December, almost the middle part of December, we're talking most of the country expected to have above normal temperatures, especially in the central U.S. And as far as precip is concerned, the best chance to be wetter than normal will continue to be in the northwestern part of the country, which is leaning toward wetter than normal as you head toward the Great Lakes. That's a look at your Local News Live National Weather Forecast. Have a great night.
A lot to keep an eye on. Let's get to other headlines now. Houthi rebels fired a missile today, striking a U.S.-owned commercial ship off the coast of Yemen.
Yeah, this is a further escalation in tensions in the Middle East after American-led strikes on the rebels. Now, rebels also fired a missile at an American destroyer in the Red Sea yesterday. Attacks by the Iran-backed militants in the Red Sea have effectively closed one of the globe's main trade routes to container ships.
Now, oil tankers are starting to avoid the southern Red Sea, adding days to the journey. Energy prices could spike, and gas prices could also begin to rise.
Dramatic drone video over Iceland tonight. Officials there are saying they're battling, quote, tremendous forces of nature after molten lava set several houses in this small fishing village on fire.
It's the second time in less than a month the volcano has erupted. Residents were ordered to evacuate just hours before after a series of small earthquakes rattled the region, warning of imminent danger. Scientists say it looks like the volcano is now easing, but say it's too soon to declare the danger over.
Stay with us here on Local News Live. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. It is Iowa Caucus Day, and of course, we have our Iowa political director, Dave Price, in Des Moines. Dave, I know the numbers are coming up in the screens behind you. The AP has called it for Donald Trump. I want to ask you about those numbers. Have we heard anything else? What are we seeing?
Yeah, we're getting more numbers, and this is playing out the way you expected coming into this in the smaller, quicker precincts. So at places where people got in there, didn't give a lot of speeches, did their secret ballot, and then they added them up pretty quickly. We knew we could get numbers around 7:30 or so Iowa time. That's exactly what happened. The one part that really makes this highly unusual is that there are people, picture there are 1,700 places across the state where people are caucusing on the Republican side. Mostly churches, schools, community centers, buildings like that. Old school, you might see somebody's house, but that's pretty rare that it's still done that way. It is unusual in the sense that we had a former president running Donald Trump, so the polls have been lopsided for a long time. So there are people in this state who have not caucused yet because they haven't gotten to that portion of the evening, yet the Associated Press has already called this for Donald Trump based on their entrance polls. So they're talking to people before they go in there to caucus. Really, really unusual. That's not the way this usually plays out. Typically in an election, you don't call the winner before everybody has voted. That's what's happened this time based on those entrance polls. So as we look at these new numbers, we're up to 1,358 people statewide, and Donald Trump has about 57%. Nikki Haley is in second with 17.9%. Ron DeSantis third at 17.4%. Everybody else way down in single digits. Super early on as we're talking. Now we just bumped up to 1,430 votes. The record for turnout was 2016. Having said that, back then, there were about 16 candidates, if memory serves. This time around, there are really 6. Now, Chris Christie, we see, is still getting some support, even though he's not running anymore. But think of the difference between 16 and 6. You had far more people out there doing it, and the weather wasn't awful like it is tonight. And the weather would be a reason for some folks to stay home. So would the lopsided polls, too, if they thought Donald Trump was going to win anyway. So it's such an unusual factor that it's already called, but this does line up the way the expectations were for this, that the true battle would be for second place. And as we look at the map, Nikki Haley so far is carrying one of Iowa's 99 counties. They're not complete yet because these numbers are still coming in. So you have 1,522 now. We don't know exactly what turnout would be. It's not going to match 186,000. You wouldn't expect that it was in 2016. Whether it's 130, 140, 150,000, we don't know yet. So we have a long way to go, and it might be quite a while before we get a better sense of who's going to get second by night's end.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, Dave. As the night goes on, I'm curious what you're watching the most. We know that Nikki Haley is heavily relying on those suburban districts out of near the big city like Des Moines, where you are. What are you going to be watching more closely as the night progresses, and when do you think we could maybe get a call on this race?
I keep peeking over my left shoulder here because on the big map, Polk is, Iowa's a funky state in the sense that you almost have 99 squares. Most counties are in the shape of a square. And Polk is pretty much in the middle. To the west, one county is Dallas County. It's one of the fastest growing counties in the entire country. Those would be those suburban voters. Curious to see how Nikki Haley does there or whether DeSantis can do it.
All right, our Iowa political director, Dave Price, keeping track of everything in Des Moines. Thank you so much for those numbers. And of course, we will continue to check in and see how tonight ends up.
Yep, thanks so much, Dave, doing the hard work for us tonight. So thanks for being with us this hour here on Local News Live. We're going to have more coverage for you, though, throughout the night. Stay with us right now.
We're going to go to our station, KWQC. Don't go anywhere.
All eyes in America will be on Iowa. After months of campaigning, which Republican will pull to the top? We're bringing you live Team 4 coverage from across Siouxland and from caucus headquarters in Des Moines. Live from Signal Hill, this is a special edition of KTIV News 4, the Iowa Caucuses.
Good evening, I'm Jessica Bowman. Our Iowa caucus coverage continues right now. In less than an hour, former President Donald Trump is now the 2024 presidential nominee. And so this news coming in early tonight. You're taking a look here at our screen, and when just right now, 3% reporting in Iowa. However, that news came down with less than 1%. And you can see the total numbers here for the state of Iowa. 54.4% right now for Donald Trump. We're going to continue to follow along with these numbers, but right now, I want to take you to Woodbury County, and that is where we're joined with KTIV's Matt Hoffman, where, as you can see, right now, Woodbury County coming in at 68.4%. Matt, what can you tell us? Kind of paint the picture for us. What is the scene like right now in Woodbury County?
Yeah, sure, Jessica. The scene is folks are starting to clear out. They had to deal with some party business, but of course that presidential preference, that's what everyone was on everyone's mind. And we have fresh results. These literally just a few minutes ago, we were able to get a hold of these. There are 2 precincts here at North Middle, and this could represent a larger, the picture large in Woodbury County. So let's run through this. Former President Donald Trump finishing in first place here in these 2 precincts, 47 votes in one precinct, 57 in another, for a total of 104 votes. Former Ambassador Nikki Haley finished in second place. She had 22 votes in one precinct, 21 in another, for a total of 43 votes. So that's former President Trump and then former Ambassador Nikki Haley. In third place, former Governor Ron DeSantis. He had 26 votes in one precinct, but only 11 votes in another precinct, bringing him to a total of 37. Again, good enough for third place. And Vivek Ramaswamy finishing in fourth place, 3 votes in one precinct, but a hefty 11 in another precinct, for a total of 14. So again, those final results here at North Middle School, you have former President Trump in first place, former Ambassador Nikki Haley in second place, Governor Ron DeSantis in third place, and Vivek Ramaswamy in fourth. If we understand correctly, the other candidates here didn't receive a single vote. As I mentioned, things starting to clear out. Folks going home. Cold temperatures didn't dull anyone. These bleachers were filled with supporters earlier, but things settling now. So we'll send it back to you, Jessica, in the studio.
All right, KTIV's Matt Hoffman at North Middle School in Woodbury County with the newest information coming in. So let's talk more about the numbers that Matt just received there from Woodbury County. And as we take a look at this, you can see here, of course, Donald Trump coming in as the front runner with 68.4%. Now, you know, this has become really a race for second place, as this was called so early in the evening. So I want to show you here as we take a look again at Woodbury County. Right now, coming in behind the leader, we're looking at Ron DeSantis. This is just in Woodbury County again. So you can see the numbers here, 14.0%. And coming in third, 6 votes, Vivek Ramaswamy, 10.5. So these are the numbers that we're looking here from Woodbury County. And then we have Nikki Haley with 3 votes here, 5.3%. So again, as this was called so early, it's really a race for second. So as we continue to follow this information, of course, we are continuing to bring you the newest information as it comes in. So we're going from Woodbury County and we're headed up north. We're headed to Sioux County. That's where we find KTIV's Clayton Anderson with the newest information. Clayton, what numbers can you give us right now?
Yeah, exciting stuff, Jessica. And what I can tell you from Matt Hoffman's precinct, it's a little bit different here in Hull, Iowa. Yes, Donald Trump still won this caucus location here at the Hull Community Building, but it was a little bit closer. He received 123 out of 236 votes, but a close second place was Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who received 95 votes. So here in Sioux County and Hull, Iowa really became a 2-legged race for the 236 people that came out. And it was a quick process, no real hiccups, pretty packed room here. Everybody filed in. They talked a little bit of party business. There was only people who got up and spoke for Donald Trump. and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. There was no other representatives for the other candidates before the caucus vote. Then they voted, and that's the numbers we got here. So that was the action. It kind of formed into, once again, a two-legged race between Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and the former President Donald Trump, winning this location with about 52% of the votes. Jessica.
All right, Clayton, before we let you go tonight, I also want to talk more about turnout. How was the turnout for people in Sioux County this evening, just braving that bitterly cold? And it looks like we may have lost Clayton Anderson again. Reporting from KTIV, he is in Hull, Iowa. We'll check back in with him, and hopefully he can answer some of that voter turnout questions. But as you can see from those numbers there on your screen, people did turn out in Sioux County, Iowa, to cast their decision on who they think should be the 2024 presidential nominee, which as we take a look at totals in the entire state of Iowa, I want to give you a whole picture now. We were focused in on those few counties there, but I want to take a look at the entire state so you can see the results as they come in. Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump at 53.7%. And you can see how many people have turned out to cast that decision for the Iowa caucuses. So as I mentioned earlier, of course, now it's a race for second. And what happens next? We are 8 days away from New Hampshire. Whoever finishes second, this could be some large momentum from them moving forward to New Hampshire and beyond. So as we continue to follow along with the newest numbers coming in, I want to bring you back to Siouxland and to northwest Iowa. And it looks like we're headed to Plymouth County now. You can see here we're getting some new results coming in. It looks like this is not uploading. However, KTIV is on the ground in Plymouth County. We're going to send things over to our reporter, KTIV, Katie Koppel. She has the latest results from where she's located. Katie, what can you tell us?
Hi, Jessica. Well, as you can see, they're wrapping up behind me here at the Lamar's Convention Center in Plymouth County. We had 4 precincts turn out tonight. Over 500 people crowded in this room. At one point, they rented a chair, so there's a lot of people that showed up tonight. But let me give you those results as we got them just about 15 minutes ago. Tonight, 297 people came out and voted for Trump for the caucus. DeSantis pulled in 93 votes here in Lamar's. Haley with 66. Vivek Ramaswamy got 42, and Ryan Binkley with 3 votes. So 501, to be specific, votes tonight. There was also some excitement on stage as Lamar's residents and Plymouth County voters were speaking about their respective candidates and why the others should vote for them. When we had a little scuffle up on the stage over Trump supporters and a very anti-Trump supporter. So a lot of heated arguments here in Lamar's, but overall a very quick process. A lot of people, almost double than what they were expecting to turn out here tonight with the cold. But I think a very good representation here in Plymouth County. But for now, I'm going to send it back to you at the CTV desk. Jessica?
All right, Katie Koppel live for us in Lamar's this evening in Plymouth County, bringing in those numbers. And as she said, turnout was greater than expected. And, you know, we've been talking about this throughout the evening, not only here in Siouxland, but across the nation. Of course, the Hawkeye State having a lot of national attention coming in on Iowa as is the cold weather, because it's been bitterly cold. Is it going to affect turnout today? And as you can see, so far, the numbers have indicated it has not affected turnout. And so I want to take a look again. Katie was just in Plymouth County here. Our number is not quite updating here on the touchscreen board, but as we take a look at total, because we are getting a look at the total indication of what is being represented here, former President Donald Trump, the front runner, 52.9%, I believe it was. And so as I've mentioned, a lot of people now paying attention to who is coming in second. And as we can see right now, Ron DeSantis so far has been coming in second throughout the leaderboard. So, of course, this is something we are continuing to follow as these results continue to roll in. And if you are just joining us, I'm Jessica Bowman with KTIV News in Sioux City, Iowa. And our coverage has continued all through the night. Now, one of the biggest indicators of moving forward 8 days to New Hampshire is not only less than an hour was former President Donald Trump declared the 2024 presidential GOP nomination, but now we are looking at second place. And of course, those numbers indicate what we are looking at here. And earlier tonight, we were greeted with Iowa political director Dave Price with his surprise as he was speaking to our colleagues in D.C. That's when the news first broke, just before 7:40, that former President Donald Trump was the front runner. And so he was asked, "Are you surprised this information just coming in?" And Iowa political director Dave Price said, this is very surprising because people are still caucusing. And KTIV's Iowa political director Dave Price is also with KTIV's Matt Breen. They join us live from Des Moines this evening with a breakdown of the numbers that are rolling in and just as a whole, what we are seeing happen tonight in the Iowa caucuses.
Have largely stuck with Trump. Now, evangelicals may be different today than they were years back, and there's more of a political part of this, perhaps. But it makes such a difference for DeSantis, and he would come after Trump and contrast himself with Trump in certain ways, saying, hey, when I say I'm going to do something, I do it. When Trump says something like build the wall, have Mexico pay for it, he doesn't. He tried to make that connection as opposed to really trying to peel off those evangelicals from Trump to him, which is a hard thing to do. And that's what we've been watching for months. And it may, looking at these results, it's an impossible task to do it enough to get him to first. The question is, as we look at however many votes are still out there from these caucus totals, he's got to find enough people to really bump him up.
And there are fewer evangelicals. You dissect the polls in Iowa, and you can see that in 2016, 63% identified as evangelicals.
Yeah.
It's down to the mid-50s now, which you think wouldn't help Donald Trump if his base are truly evangelical voters. So the question is, who else is he pulling in now to maintain that lead or increase that lead that he's got tonight?
Right, and he has been able to connect with newbies. He did that in 2016. The polls show that he was going to do that again. That's one of those things we got to wait and see the numbers from how this turns out, because the first-time caucus goers are pretty unpredictable about whether they would actually show up. But you have people who aren't really generally involved in politics who find his style unique and what they want. He does particularly well with folks who do not have college education. That's kind of been his thing in 16, 20, and now possibly again in 24. And you start digging into the register poll and some of the other ones. Nikki Haley tends to do better with college-educated folks, and it depends who's showing up. And if it's a lot of these folks who don't have college degrees, Trump has a stronghold with them, then you see big numbers.
And what you're also seeing, too, is, again, the results are slow to trickle in because, as you said right off the top, people are still caucusing.
Right.
I mean, there were people still in line at caucus sites at 7 o'clock. And, of course, if you're in line, even if 7 o'clock comes and goes, you're still allowed to go inside and caucus. But you have to be in line at 7 o'clock to do so. So you still have people statewide that are still caucusing at this hour. Republicans, as we've always said, tend to caucus faster because they simply walk in, nominate precinct captains, do a secret ballot vote, and then, as we saw in Dallas County, NBC had a picture of the caucus site there, pre-ballot, full house. Post-ballot, when they're supposed to be working on party business, establishing the party's planks, completely empty. So they came, they voted, they came, they saw, they conquered, they came, they voted, they left.
Just anecdotally from a person at a school site in Des Moines, Trump 63, Haley 55, DeSantis 41, Ramaswamy 8, Binkley 1. Just one individual site, but just to show you that every single site isn't going to be a blowout. This would be a Des Moines one. This is south side of Des Moines. And so some are going to be competitive. Can't really draw anything out of it, I don't think, because it's just one little precinct. But it shows that, these will have different results based on where they are.
Inevitability. That was the word I was looking for earlier when talking about the springboard that Iowa could be for Donald Trump. Does this give him an air of inevitability as we move forward into New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada?
He will say yes.
Yep.
And I keep coming back to DeSantis because it's hard not to, because of the expectations he put by himself on this by saying he would win, which it's hard to know why he said it. I don't know if he's trying to show that he wasn't intimidated by Trump, whatever it is, and it may be an unfortunate mistake by him to set that expectation that, hey, I'm going to win this thing, and he's not going to, obviously, because we've seen these entrance posts. Another anecdotal one, if I can throw this in from Mahaska County, just one precinct out there, but somebody telling me that, and we'll see if this is a trend, this is just something to watch. The one thing about Nikki Haley is that, yes, she had some growth in the polls, and she had that in Iowa as well, and of course nationally. And once they got into the debates, she tended to fare well with that. Her polling numbers didn't go crazy off the charts during that last Iowa poll, though, and so you wonder if she's kind of plateaued. You already mentioned the enthusiasm. That poll showed that her folks, her supporters, were not as enthusiastic as, say, Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis' supporters. And this gets inside baseball. When you start talking about the ground game, Trump really invested in this and put a strong infrastructure together so that at these 1,700 sites, they could have representation there. Ideally, you want somebody to be a captain. You want somebody to give a speech to try to sway people to say, hey, we're winners, come join us, that kind of thing. DeSantis invested in that as well. Nikki Haley had focused far more on New Hampshire with that primary. Primary is easier. It's more traditional, right? You have all day to do it. Caucuses are very quirky and require you to show up at 7 o'clock for a variety of reasons. That's tough for some people to do. Haley didn't have that infrastructure. Now, she had a significant financial backer, a super PAC, the Koch brothers. They're Americans for Prosperity. So they were doing a lot of this door knocking. And so if you're watching from Iowa, these may have been the folks that knocked on your door on Nikki Haley's behalf. These people know what they're doing. They're not Nikki Haley's campaign, and they didn't get the early start that some of the other folks like Trump or DeSantis got. So at this one, it's just one precinct, so just bear with me on an anecdote, if you will. But at this one, Haley didn't have any representation there in this Mahaska County one. There were 117 people there, according to this caucus goer. 61 went for Trump, 24 DeSantis, 15 for Haley, 2 for Binkley, 14 for Ramaswamy, and Chris Christie got 1. Just one. This is kind of the Oskaloosa area, precinct in Oskaloosa. It's just one site, but we'll see how this plays out to see if Haley had representation, because there are people who go into these caucuses who are still thinking, well, I like this person and this person, I'm not really sure. And maybe you get in there and you hear somebody give a passionate speech, and it's the neighbor you like.
Yeah. And it changes your mind.
And it changes your mind. You're like, oh, yeah, Matt's right. He's smart. I trust him. I'm going to go that way, too. Or the opposite. Matt gave a speech, and I'm thinking, I disagree with everything that dude said. Yeah. I'm going with the other guy. Whatever the scenario is. But you really want to have those leaders in each of these places, and that was going to be a significant challenge for Nikki Haley, because she had not put that infrastructure together herself and was largely relying on this super PAC to do. A super PAC, you could have a billionaire give $100 million if you really wanted to do that, so you don't have the same kind of restrictions. And so it adds a whole different dynamic to that. Having said all of that, it didn't make any difference as far as winning the caucus goes, because Donald Trump appears to do that comfortably.
To your point, when I was dipping in on some coverage of a precinct in Dallas County, the very one where after the voting was over, everybody left. Ryan Binkley's name was called, and no one stood up to speak for him. It shocks me that there would be a precinct in this state, as well organized as some of these bigger campaigns are, that they wouldn't have a surrogate, or at least someone that could talk about the candidate before everyone decided to vote.
It is, I guess if you give them a little slack, there are 1,700 sites,
it's
almost 1,650. 1,652, I think was the exact number, something like that. So that can happen, and maybe the weather was crummy, or maybe somebody got sick and couldn't make it. But to your point, that's the way to be successful, is to try to have somebody in each one. And remember, when they get to the stage of the game where they're counting these ballots, whether they are ballots on a blank piece of paper where you write your candidate down, or some of them are printed up, regardless, you all go into a room with the person who's in charge of that caucus site, and each campaign can have a representative there. Clearly, at some of these sites, some of these campaigns won't have a representative there either, and that's where you really find out who has the deep organization here.
Still holding steady from what I can tell.
For a while.
1,522 total votes cast, with, again, Donald Trump way out ahead, 57% to 17.3% for Ron DeSantis, 17.1%
While you do
for
that,
Nikki
I'm going
Haley.
to check some more numbers.
Please
I'll join
do.
in a sec.
So clearly, the number's a little slow to come in because, as we said, some people are still caucusing. That's to be expected on a night like this, especially if you have a very full room. It isn't, the Iowa caucuses aren't the way they are today that they were in 1972 with the first caucus. You had people gathering in schools, in homes, in groups of 6 to 16 people. And then they would all individually report those numbers to the state party. Now you could see as many as 10 precincts getting together at a local school, and it takes a little bit longer to get through all of that secret balloting, to count those numbers, and then get them reported to the state Republican Party. But once again, we seem to be holding pretty steady right now at give or take about 1% of the total number of votes we think will be cast during the Iowa caucuses, the Republican caucuses. Probably not going to hit 186,000 votes, which was the record set by the Republican Party in 2016. Some estimates put it at 130, but let's say it's 150,000 to make the math easy. 150,000 votes, we have 1,500 in. That's exactly 1%. So once again, that's got Donald Trump at 57.6%. Ron DeSantis, second place, 17.3%. Nikki Haley, 17.1%. And if you look at if you can take a look at the map, and it's easy to find, and I dare not try to zoom my phone all the way into the camera to show you which counties are reporting. Very easy to find on the Iowa Republican Party's website, and you can follow along with me if you like. So again, I'm counting up 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about 13 counties reporting at this point. 12 of them are red, and that's the color the Iowa Republican Party has assigned to former President Donald Trump. The only county that is not a red county right now is one that's colored blue, and that's the color that the Republican Party of Iowa has given to Nikki Haley. It is also Johnson County, one of those Democratic strongholds. If you go back in time through presidential elections, you can count on two hands the number of Iowa's 99 counties that will go for a Democratic presidential candidate. They tend to be Johnson County, that's Iowa City, the University of Iowa is there. Story County, that's Ames, Iowa, that's where Iowa State University is. Catch my drift? Large college campuses, younger voters tend to vote more Democratic. You can also look in larger metropolitan areas, the Quad Cities, for example. Scott County is Davenport. Dubuque County, that is Dubuque. Also Cedar Falls and Waterloo, that's Black Hawk County. You can also look towards Cerro Gordo County, that's Mason City. You can look at Webster County, that's Fort Dodge, and Woodbury County, that's Sioux City. Those tend to be, if they do vote more Democrat than Republican, those are the counties to keep an eye on. But it's only a handful, folks. It's maybe 10 out of Iowa's 99 counties. Right now, one of those counties where Nikki Haley is doing well, that is Johnson County in eastern Iowa. So let's reset. First results were in about 7:25 on the big board behind me, and about 15 minutes later, both the Associated Press and NBC News declared that Donald Trump is the winner of the Iowa Republican Party caucuses. That is not a surprise. It's not a shock. The only shock to me is because it came so early. They hadn't been caucusing for more than 30 minutes in many locations, and because of entrance polling, which NBC News does, but also looking at precincts that are good samples for the state at large and other precincts, they look at those and they can say with some confidence, they can project that Donald Trump is the winner of the Iowa Republican caucuses. Now, doesn't mean that he is the winner. He's just been projected to be the winner, although by the end of the night, Donald Trump will win the Iowa caucuses when the final results are counted, hopefully shortly before midnight. And as we said before, it's a race for second place. Is it Ron DeSantis? Is it Nikki Haley? Ron DeSantis has put all of his eggs in Iowa's basket. He has spent a lot of time here. He has campaigned hard here. He expects to do well. In fact, at one point he said he was going to win the Iowa caucuses. I'm not sure that the numbers bear that out at this point, but he could very well do a strong second place. Here's the problem. Ron DeSantis and the rest of the Republicans move on to New Hampshire next. And in the latest poll out of New Hampshire, Ron DeSantis is running fourth. Donald Trump is in first. Nikki Haley is giving Donald Trump a run for his money in New Hampshire. Donald Trump has 39% in the latest poll. Nikki Haley just 7 points back at 32%. Then Ron DeSantis is in fourth place with 5%. So Ron DeSantis has bet the house on winning Iowa or at least a strong second place showing, and maybe that can give him the momentum to do well in the New Hampshire primary. But of course, a primary and a caucus, two very different things, two very different political animals, and so they're not necessarily comparable. Once we get past New Hampshire, South Carolina is up next, and here's where you start to see a run for Nikki Haley where she could solidify herself as that alternative to Donald Trump and may be that number 2 candidate if she can do a strong second place showing in Iowa. She's polling very well in New Hampshire. She could have a strong second place or even threaten Donald Trump for first place in New Hampshire. That would be a win. Then they move on to her home state of South Carolina. Now, the polls there don't tell you what I think they should tell you. As the former governor of South Carolina native Nikki Haley is running second to Donald Trump in several of those polls. You would think the former governor of the state would be in first place. That shows the power and the reach of the former president, Donald Trump, first in some of those polls in South Carolina. But you begin to see where Nikki Haley, if she sets herself up well in Iowa with a strong second place showing, potentially, can have a strong second place showing or contend for a win in New Hampshire and then move into her home state of South Carolina. All of a sudden, that's the first 3 presidential contests, and you could see where Nikki Haley could solidify herself as that alternative to Donald Trump. Once again, we're looking at the larger numbers that are coming in here to Caucus Central from the Iowa Republican Party. And again, as I refresh these here, give it a moment to reload. And again, follow along at home. Just go to the Iowa Republican Party's website, big banner toward the top. That's where you find the results. You can follow them all on your own. Now, here is what we're looking at still, stuck at 1,522 votes. It's about 1%, folks, but still, Donald Trump projected by NBC News and the Associated Press to be the winner of the Iowa caucuses. And again, he's got 57.6%. Second place, a shaky second, Ron DeSantis, 17.3%. And on his heels is Nikki Haley at 17.1%. Let's round out the field for you here. Vivek Ramaswamy, 7%. And then everyone else hasn't even hit the 1% mark. You have Ryan Binkley with 0.5%. You have Asa Hutchinson with 0.1%. Other is 0.1% as well. So Asa Hutchinson, the former governor of Arkansas, only doing as well as other in this case. And Chris Christie, who dropped out of the race last week, he's still pulling 0.3% right now in the Iowa caucus. So clearly still some support for Chris Christie out there. Let's do this. Let's give ourselves a moment to reset the conversation. I'm going to get with my producer, Madison, and see what's coming up next. Stay with us. More coverage from Caucus Central here in Des Moines coming your way shortly. Stick around. diverge a little bit. More on that in a moment. First, though, I want to point out some of the precinct data that we have from two precincts that are just a couple of blocks from here, the Central School campus building. It's precincts 43 and 44. This is coming to us courtesy Connor Hendricks. He's our Des Moines Capitol Bureau reporter. So there are two precincts I want to highlight specifically. One is precinct 43. Now that's going to be in Des Moines. It's got Nikki Haley with 25 votes. So she has won precinct 43. In second place, Donald Trump with 17, Ron DeSantis with 15, and Vivek Ramaswamy with 12. That's precinct 43. It's the same result in precinct 44. Again, this is going to be a Polk County district in Des Moines. Precinct 44, Nikki Haley, 29. So she wins precinct 44. Now, this is one of about 1,600 precincts in the state. But she's won precinct 44, 29 votes there for Nikki Haley. 21 for Donald Trump, 18 for Ron DeSantis, 12 for Vivek Ramaswamy, and Chris Christie, who dropped out of the race last week, 1 vote. I talked about the divergence in the data. Let's take a look at we'll take a look at one graphic first, and this is going to be the data that we're seeing here in the Caucus Center, courtesy of the Iowa Republican Party. Now, this is the data that they're getting in from all of those precincts, more than 1,600 in all. They pull in the data, then they put it up on the screen behind me, and if you do a quick refresh on those numbers, you can actually see many, many more counties have now come in. We're talking about counties in central, south central, and eastern Iowa. Now, take a look at the numbers. I'm going to refresh my screen along with you. And you can see, notice how those counties are red. They assign a color to every candidate. Red just happens to be the color for Donald Trump. He is winning in every single county highlighted on that map. They're all highlighted in red. Right now, 52% of Iowa Republican caucus goers support Donald Trump. Ron DeSantis in second place with 20%. Nikki Haley in third place with 19.4%. Vivek Ramaswamy with 7.8%. And then you have Ryan Binkley, Chris Christie, Asa Hutchinson, and other with less than 1% of the vote. Now, that's the data that we're getting directly from the Iowa Republican Party on their website and on the big boards behind me. I'm going to take a look at what Sioux City television station KTIV has on their app and on their website. They're taking their data from the AP election wire. That's the Associated Press election wire. And the data is a little bit different. Donald Trump with 2,460 total votes at 51% support. In second place, Ron DeSantis, just a little over 1,000 votes with 21% support. Nikki Haley in third, but only barely, 920 votes with 19%. Vivek Ramaswamy, 7%. Then you have Ryan Binkley at 1%, Asa Hutchinson at 0%, Christie at 0%, and then other is at 0 as well. So you're seeing two divergent bits of data here, one coming directly from the Republican Party of Iowa, the other coming from the Associated Press election wire. Now, they're still showing the candidates in the same order. Donald Trump, of course, the projected winner of the Iowa Republican caucus, that projection coming from both the Associated Press and NBC News. But you see Ron DeSantis in second, Nikki Haley in third. The numbers, though, do differ a bit from the numbers we're seeing from the state Republican Party and the Associated Press election wire. So those are two different bits of data that I wanted to highlight to you. But once again, keeping a very close eye on the numbers as they come in. The total right now, according to the party, 40,908. I want to bring political director Dave Price in now. And Dave, we've seen a big jump, a big dump of numbers come out. So we've jumped from 1,500 to 40,000.
Right.
That's a lot closer to where we want to be at this stage, because the estimate anywhere between 130 and 150,000 votes. So we may be, if it's 130 to make the math easy, we may be about a third of the way there. What do these numbers tell you, let's say, if we have a third of the vote in?
If this is going to be what it is, this is a crushing night for Ron DeSantis. He does not want to be at 20%. No. It's a crushing night for Vivek Ramaswamy, who kept saying that he was going to shock everybody. Right. And perform far better than any poll had shown that he did, that he was. He clearly was holding more events than anybody, so he worked it. He was all over the place. He did far more events than anybody else, frankly. But the numbers have been pretty steady. He's at 7.8%. That's about where he's been. Trump is down now to 52%. That means he's above 50. Mm-hmm. That was what a lot of people were looking at. Could he get 50? Nobody's ever gotten 50 in the caucus before. If you get 30, that's usually a really big night. although nobody's a former president running before.
Exactly.
So that's the big change. And that you just can't ignore that because it's so different. They just did a mild update there, but not too much has changed on the numbers. But fascinating to watch the race for second, if you will, with DeSantis and Haley. So let's see if I can do math on the fly. 8273. Don't double check my math, but it's something like that. It's close enough. It's 0.6% difference with DeSantis ahead. Now this one is from a West Des Moines precinct, and all of these are just for anecdotal purposes because it's just one precinct out of about 1,700. But there have been certain places where caucus goers have told me Democrats have come in there and caucused for Nikki Haley. That's what the Des Moines Register Iowa poll had shown coming into this, that Haley could be bringing over some independents and some Democrats. This is supposedly one of these places. It's in Polk County in West Des Moines, but looking at these numbers, Nikki Haley won this with 118. Be helpful if these numbers are a little bit bigger, or my eyes were a little bit better. Donald Trump 45, Ron DeSantis 44. Ooh. So in this one precinct, Donald Trump got third. Now this would be one of those Des Moines suburban precincts. And now this is still Polk County. Earlier tonight we were talking about Dallas County, just one county west of Polk County. And that's where Nikki Haley had to hope that she could start to do these college-educated suburban women to give her a boost there. Ron DeSantis, of course, also looking at this area where he hopes to do well. Dallas County, if you followed population changes in our state, is one of the fastest growing counties in the entire country, not to mention the state, but the entire country. A lot of new people there and a lot of younger people there. And so for DeSantis and Haley specifically, they were hoping that they could find a lot of votes there. And at least in this one precinct, they both did well, but Haley did especially well.
Connor Hendricks, our associate at the Des Moines Capitol Bureau, is not too far from us, a couple blocks away at Central Campus. Two precincts meeting there, Precinct 43, Precinct 44. Nikki Haley won them both. Trump finished second, DeSantis finished third. So again, to your point, trying to pull in college-educated women, mothers, to try to pull them to her side and use that to kind of buoy her numbers in this caucus.
And that was part of the game plan. The challenge for her is that she does not have the statewide organization. It's great to pull that off in the suburbs, Des Moines and elsewhere, but she needs it in some of these smaller counties too, and that's where she is not nearly as strong. And because they did not invest in that infrastructure, which is vital in a caucus setting, this is not a primary, in a caucus you really need to invest in that deep organization. So in these 1,700 sites, ideally you want somebody on your team who can be there, who can give a speech, who can rally people, try to win undecideds over, all that kind of stuff. And that was going to be a major challenge for Nikki Haley coming into this. Could one of these super PACs that endorsed her do some of the work for her? And that's what they were hoping. They're the ones out door knocking in that for her. Her primary focus, frankly, had been on New Hampshire. She jumped more into Iowa as her poll numbers were jumping, as she performed well in some of those debates. But on a night like this, it really pays off to have the deep organization. Let's hope this doesn't happen often, but the numbers just went backwards on us.
Oh, boy.
So now we are back down to 38,000 when we were about 41,000 before.
Jeff Kaufman talked a little bit about this probably an hour and a half ago when he addressed us in the media center here. He said they're going to double and triple check. And if there's a discrepancy, those numbers might change. And so I think we've just seen that. Maybe there was a discrepancy, an extra zero, or they forgot to carry the one when they were doing the math at the caucus site. And maybe that's why they took some of the results back to make sure that they were absolutely correct before they got added to the total.
And the percentages changed just a tad, but you can, that's how Associated Press can make the prediction. Now, no doubt it's going to tick people off, and Ron DeSantis' team sent out a statement on this saying that, quote, "It is absolutely outrageous that the media would participate in election interference by calling the race before tens of thousands of Iowans even had a chance to vote. The media is in the tank for Trump, and this is the most egregious example yet. Now, Trump, who is constantly ripping on the media, would probably not say that the legacy media would be in the tank for him. But in DeSantis's defense, that can sway people. Typically, this doesn't happen because it's not lopsided. They do this on entrance polls, so they're talking to people as they come into their caucus sites. That's how they can get enough sample of people to give them an idea about, okay, we think we know how this is going to go. And they're not predicting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're just predicting Trump's going to win based on the margins they saw. They felt comfortable doing that. But if you're one of those other candidates who needs to do well, even if you know you're not going to win, for DeSantis, for Haley, I mean, they're probably ticked off.
To be fair, the Iowa caucuses start at 7 o'clock.
Right.
And if they release data at 7:10, 7:15, 7:30, declaring a winner or saying this person is so far out ahead of the other candidates, it doesn't make as much of a difference as it would during a general election, because everybody who's going to caucus has to be inside. They're already caucusing, and maybe they are checking their mobile device.
And some of them were, because that's who I was hearing from a bunch of them who were angry about, hey, how the heck can this be already? How can you already say it? Now, I mean, we know how they're doing it because they're sampling people as they go in there. Now, is that going to, if you're waiting and waiting through long speeches and you see that, you know, like, all right, I'm not going to win, my person isn't going to win, I'm out of here, it's cold, I want to go watch the rest of the football game, then sure, maybe that can make a difference. And, you know, DeSantis is probably ticked off. DeSantis is probably ticked off, period. He said he was going to win the caucus.
And he's not going to win the caucus.
He's not going to win the caucus, and he's probably going to lose by a lot unless something dramatically changes with these numbers that show him trailing Trump by 30-plus points at this point. But this would be, for us, you know, people like to rip on polls, but Ann Seltzer's statewide poll tends to be pretty close.
She's the best in the business, and we're seeing the numbers line right up.
And it's a point in time when you're sampling people, but they turn out pretty accurately. You know, she was probably out in the field sampling people Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or Thursday, Friday, Saturday, something like that, probably before Saturday, because it came out Saturday night. So they have time to go through the numbers. So yes, it's a few days behind by the time the caucus hits on Monday, but they're usually within several points. It would be stunning if they're wrong by 30 points.
Right.
And so DeSantis knew that coming in. Plus, some of these campaigns and super PACs have internal polls that give them an idea about where things are. But if you're DeSantis, you can be angry that any projections would come out while people are still in the process.
I talked about this about a half hour ago, the path forward for Nikki Haley. If she finishes second, which is where the polls say she should finish, if she does finish second and then she moves into a state where Ron DeSantis has not put a lot of effort, in New Hampshire, he's polling at about 5%. She's polling within 7% of the former president. He's at 39%. She's at 32%. And then you play it forward again to the next state, her home state of South Carolina. Is there then the possibility that Nikki Haley solidifies herself as that alternative to Donald Trump if the stars align in those first three states?
Yeah, that's what she's trying to do. Now, look, everything is super uphill, way uphill, because it's Trump, because it's a former president, because he's still popular with at least a good chunk of the base. So everything is uphill. But for Haley, it might behoove her chances for DeSantis to drop out after this, because that eliminates an alternative. And no disrespect to anybody else up on the list there, Ramaswamy, Binkley, or Hutchinson, but they're going to be way down.
Now, we should point out that we're paying all this attention to the Republican presidential caucus in Iowa. Democrats are also caucusing today as well. Brianna Balog from KWQC in the Quad Cities, she's at a Democratic caucus site at North High School with what she saw during that event.
Take that and I'm going
to Pleasant Valley High School in Bettendorf, and Donald Trump is the big winner. He walked away with 47 votes tonight. That's up from Haley at 31. Ron DeSantis had 25. And those results echo what we've seen across the state, where Trump came in with a large favorable lead in the polls. Voters told me that they like Trump's personality, economy, and foreign policy, and said that they think that he's the #1 person to beat. Next up is New Hampshire, where Haley and DeSantis will all have to at least feel Pleasant Valley High School. The former president around, and then finally at 7 o'clock we got kicked off with caucus time. About 15 minutes later, we were already counting ballots in our location. So just like across the rest of the state, we saw Trump with a big lead here. I think at my precinct location he had 47 to Haley's 31, and Ron DeSantis had 25 votes at my caucus location that I went to tonight. But those are numbers that we're seeing across the state. The AP called the race for Trump shortly after it began, after caucus time began, and that's because he came into this caucus with a 30-point lead. And so I think a lot of people, a lot of pundits were essentially watching to see who was going to finish in second and head into New Hampshire. And we saw Nikki Haley doing pretty well here in the Quad Cities. So with that, we'll take it back to you. Thanks.
Caucuses, two points we can make almost immediately. One, Donald Trump has been projected the winner of the Iowa Republican caucuses. Both NBC and AP have projected him the winner. The other thing we can tell you, it could be kind of a long night. We have 11 counties that are fully counted. By the way, Iowa has 99 counties in all. So 11 down, 88 to go. Connor Hendricks from our Capitol Bureau here was in one of those precincts tonight. And Connor, I know this is your first experience in that caucus setting. What was it like inside there tonight?
Well, everything really ran quite smoothly tonight. It took about 30 minutes to get a lot of the procedural stuff out of the way, and then votes were counted. They started counting votes and taking votes right at about an hour in. Okay. That only took about 3 or 4 minutes, and then it only took them about, say, 5 to 10 minutes to count everything. It was extremely efficient tonight.
And the Republicans do caucus in a slightly different way than Democrats do. Democrats, who are caucusing this year but will handle presidential preference by mail this year, they would typically get into the room, gather in groups, one group representing each candidate. They make sure that each of them are viable, which means they have to represent at least 15% of the assembled people at that caucus site. And if they don't, they have to disband and go find a viable candidate to align with. So that does take a little bit longer. The Republican process is pretty quick. How do they take care of it?
Right, it's very simple. Everyone is given a little slip of paper that's about the size of a Band-Aid or so. It's very tiny, and a little golf pencil, and all you do is just write down who you want, and it can be anyone. Those votes are then put into a box, and tonight it actually looked like a shoebox. And they are put in there and then counted in front of everybody.
So we already know that Donald Trump is the projected winner of the Iowa Republican caucuses, but the two precincts that you were covering tonight showed a bit of a different outcome.
That's right. In fact, Haley won both precincts 43 and 44. And if you don't mind, I can actually read off these numbers for you. For precinct 43, Ron DeSantis, 15, Nikki Haley, 25, Vivek Ramaswamy, 12, and Trump 17 for a total of 69. Now over at precinct 44, Ron DeSantis came in with 18, Haley 29, Vivek 12, Chris Christie 1, and then Trump 21 for a total of 81.
So in both of those precincts, Nikki Haley won. Nikki Haley right now, as we take a look at the very latest numbers we have from the Iowa Republican Party, we can see Nikki Haley trails both Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis. Donald Trump has 53% of the vote that's in right now, a total of 38,000 votes in. We're probably about a third or a quarter of the way there. So Donald Trump with 53% of the vote, Ron DeSantis 20.1% of the vote, Nikki Haley 18.3% of the vote. And just to kind of round it out here, Vivek Ramaswamy 7.7%, and then the rest of the candidates in the field, including Chris Christie, who dropped out last week, less than 1% support. Again, 11 counties fully counted. Iowa has 99 counties, so have 88 more to go. Connor, as you've interviewed these candidates, they've all assessed that they need to do well in Iowa. And I know that Ron DeSantis had sort of changed the language that he was using on the campaign trail from I'm going to win the Iowa caucuses to I think I'm going to do well in the Iowa caucuses. And that's a subtle change but significant because potentially he could see the writing on the wall knowing that Donald Trump, as a former president, would have a leg up in an Iowa caucus.
Right, and DeSantis really kind of bet the farm, so to speak, in the last couple of months here in Iowa, but he kind of walked those remarks back, and as you can see, it's really a spirited race for second place, and of course Trump has the lion's share of the votes tonight and even in the polls before this.
And Ron DeSantis, of course, sort of bet the house on doing well in Iowa. He hasn't paid as much of attention to New Hampshire, to South Carolina, to Nevada, the next couple of primaries that are coming down the pike. Nikki Haley, on the other hand, she not only paid attention to Iowa, she also had a tremendous campaign built up in New Hampshire where she's running second to Donald Trump in the latest poll, 39%, Haley with 32%. And of course, then you look even further down the line, and the next state after New Hampshire is Nikki Haley's home state of South Carolina.
It's interesting because Ron DeSantis is not immediately going to New Hampshire tomorrow. That's going to be the case for most of these candidates who leave here. They're going to go straight to New Hampshire, but Ron DeSantis is actually going straight to South Carolina first. He will make appearances in New Hampshire, of course, but he's really going to try and push hard in South Carolina.
Very good. Once again, here are the numbers as we have them from the Iowa Republican Party. Donald Trump with 52% of the vote, and again, this is with 11 counties fully counted and several others partially counted. In second place, Ron DeSantis with 20%, Nikki Haley 18.3%, Vivek Ramaswamy with 7.7%. That is going to wrap up our coverage from Des Moines for now. However, we will continue to keep you updated because, as we said, with only 11 of Iowa's 99 counties in,
got a long way to go.
Got a long way to go. For Connor Hendricks, I'm Matt Breen. We're at the Media Center here in Des Moines covering the Iowa caucuses. Back to you.